Welcome in, everyone, to the It's Official podcast, created by Jeff Siegel, proudly hosted by Jeremy Plonk. We're presented by First Bet and Express Bet, and each week, look at 5 hot topics in horse racing. Not a lot cooking right now, post-Breeders' Cup and into this Thanksgiving week. We're the week before Thanksgiving. A lot of great racing around the country coming up over the holiday next week. As for this week, probably the biggest news in racing on the to-come front would be opening day at Fairgrounds coming up on Thursday this week for the racing meet in New Orleans, which gets underway. Of course, we're not too far away from the extended Oaklawn meeting opening up as well. Tampa Bay Downs just recently opened in South Florida. So a lot cooking in terms of the comings and goings in racing, but in terms of the major stakes races this weekend, it'll be a little bit on the quiet front. Last week was the Claiming Crown at Churchill Downs. Hats off to the blue collar horses. We'll talk about one of those coming up a little bit later in the podcast. But let's get to our 5 hot topics as we do each and every week here on the show. And let's start things off as we typically do with the Goosebump Award winner. Which horse got us most excited last week? Got us out of our chair, got the hair on our arms standing up. Well, it was a filly we hadn't seen in some time. The 3-year-old filly, Shred the Gnar, was back in action in the Chaluki Stakes at Churchill Downs. We hadn't seen her since May, but she said, "I'm back."
Side and is asked to quicken now. They're off the turn. Shred the Gnar has turned back the first challenge of One Magic Filly. Heads for the ace pole, length into half lead. Ragtime rolls up into third. Ragtime's getting into gear late in the final furlong. Shred the Gnar still in front. One Magic Filly's very game, but is still second. Shred the Gnar, no signs of stopping. Shred the Gnar opens up to the wire and scores by nearly 3, defeating One Magic Filly. Ragtime ran on for third, and Impel was fourth.
She did it with something in the tank and can't wait to see what this 3-year-old does perhaps next year at age 4. She's well-bred. She's a full sister to Owendale, $1.5 million earner, of course, third in the Preakness, multiple grade 1 place horse who won the Oklahoma Derby, Ohio Derby, and other races as a 3-year-old. But as for Shred the Gnars, look, she's just a neck away from being undefeated lifetime in 4 career starts. She's now won 3 in a row after that debut second, beaten only by a neck. This was her first stakes win, and she did it against some good runners in that field. There was Impel in there and some others who had some decent accomplishments. One Magic Filly, Ragtime was a horse who had a lot of credentials behind her, but it was all about Shred the Gnar, and she looks like a good one. We'll see her down in Florida to be sure at Gulfstream perhaps over the course of the winter for trainer Brian Lynch. Exciting sprint filly. How far will she go? Well, this was a 1-turn mile, but she's gone long in the 2-turn races prior to that, so I think she could be very effective around 1 turn or 2. She certainly had the ears up and galloped out well after the win in that 1-turn mile here in the Chaluki Stakes at Churchill Downs. Goosebump Award winner this week, Shred the Gnar. Welcome back, and she did it in big-time style. Let's go to our second topic this week, and it's kind of a little bit of a retrofit, if you will. There was a horse, 15 years ago or so, 12, 13 years ago, named Rapid Redux. Perhaps you remember Rapid Redux winning 22 races in a row to wrap up his career. Well, his owner, Robert L. Cole Jr.'s got another one who's looking a lot like Rapid Redux. But let's talk about the former before we get into the current horse that we want to talk about, who was the stakes winner at Charlestown last week. Rapid Redux won 22 consecutive races, wrapping up at the start of the 2013 season. He won 23 of 24 starts after being haltered for $6,500 in a claiming race at Penn National. Again, Robert L. Cole, the owner. Back then, the trainer, David Wells, was at the controls. He won 19 races during the 2011 season, matching Citation's most wins in a year from 1948. If you don't remember Rapid Redux, here he is winning his 22nd in a row, and that earned him a life of retirement at the Old Friends Farm.
Furlong and a half left to go to the second wire. J.D. Acosta asking Rapid Redux for a little bit more. Awesome Rhythm came close to him last time. Can he get Rapid Redux this time? A 16th of a mile out. Rapid Redux holding Awesome Rhythm. Rapid Redux digging down. Awesome Rhythm on the outside. The beat goes on. The streak goes on. Rapid Redux, a 22nd consecutive win.
That would be his final start. Got a special Eclipse Award for 2011. And again, retired to Old Friends Farm. Look, it wasn't all rags to riches in this story. Of course, David Wells, the trainer of Rapid Redux, a couple years later would end up in prison for race fixing and doping charges at Penn Nationals. So there's always some taint as we look back on the career and the excessive win streak that we saw, the incredible win streak from Rapid Redux. But at the time, he was a starter allowance phenom who fit the conditions. I believe that seven different tracks represented in that 22 race win streak that he pulled off at the end of his career. So, it's not all wine and roses when we look back at the career of Rapid Redux. There's certainly an air of skepticism about the success that he had. Now let's fast forward to last week at Charlestown and back-to-back winner of the Randy Funkhauser Memorial Stakes, Teaching the Release. Back in the high life now for owner Robert L. Cole, Marylander. Robert Cole Jr. has Teach and Release, now in the care of Stephen Murdoch. And this is a horse who just a couple weeks ago won the West Virginia Breeders' Classics, and he is absolutely running roughshod over the West Virginia breds. He's not to the 22 wins in a row kind of streak, but he's running off a similar kind of feel that what we saw with Rapid Redux. He's dominating a division for an owner who's been dominant in the past. Robert Cole Jr. used to have as many as 500 starters in a year. His operation is trimmed back 85, 90%, about 60 starters a year over the past couple seasons. But I'll tell you what, you get some Rapid Redux reflections when you watch Teach and the Release. Let's watch Teach and Release win back-to-back editions of the Funkhauser Memorial last Saturday at Charlestown.
Up top, Teach and the Release takes charge and takes over at will. Opens up with powerful strides. Has put 7 links on the field in the blink of an eye after 3 quarters in 1:14 and 4, and he's running off the screen again. Teach and the Release is in charge with a furlong left to go, and he has left the others in the wake of another impressive performance. It's all Teach and the Release, the class of the West Virginia breds, and he's geared down to win it by 6 easy lengths. He was just loping across the finish line. Excellent start, rallied for second, and then late in the game with Ronaldo.
Teaching the Release now 15 for 33 lifetime, and just a major improvement over the past couple seasons of racing. He's a West Virginia bred that's going to run off a big win streak. The way it looks, nobody's going to beat him in some time, apparently, when you look at the West Virginia bred state bred ranks. So Teaching the Release, Rapid Redux, a little flashback to 2011, about 14 years ago. Same owner, different trainer, of course, and with what Stephen Murdoch and Robert Cole Jr. are able to do with Teach and Release is something that we see on a regional basis, where sometimes you just get a dominant horse in state bred ranks and they kind of hold that crown for a couple seasons. We'll see how long Teach and Release can kind of run out that kind of huge effort that he's putting up here during the course of 2024 and 2025. Let's go now to our third topic this week on the It's Official podcast. We go from the regional circuits to a look at the Kentucky Oaks Trail, perhaps. John Sadler's been trimming the Oaks branches. Of course, we remember the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, where his Super Corridora was ever able to beat Bob Baffert's favorite Explorer in that race. 8-1 upset for Super Corridora. Well, it was Sadler back at it again, beating Baffert this past weekend with the 2-year-old fillies on the Oaks Trail. Here's Rivera winning the Desi Arnaz.
Around the far turn, Bourbon and Ginger, Hamika and Rivera. They're across the track after a 45.94 half mile, and they're into the stretch in the Desi Arnaz. And it's Rivera to the outside, and Hamika. They're right together, nose to nose, coming to the final furlong. Rivera outside, Hamika down toward the inside. The two of them battle head and head. Rivera and Hamika. Rivera's got a neck in front. Hamika on the inside, trying to stick with her all the way to the wire, but Rivera wins. Takes the Desi Arnaz over Hamika, then Cosmic Heat and Heaven's Bolt.
Rivera giving John Sadler a second big 2-year-old filly stakes win at Del Mar this year. A bigger upset probably than what we saw in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. Again, at 8-1, the winner there, Super Corridora, beat the 3-2 favorite Explorer for Bob Baffert. Here, Hamika was 1-5. That's because in the Enokia Stakes, she was able to beat Rivera last time. Rivera flips the script here, and right now Sadler seems to have the upper hand on Baffert with these 2-year-old fillies. As for Rivera, she's run 4 times in her career. She debuted second behind the aforementioned Explorer, who would go on to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies as the favorite and end up second in there. She was second in the Enokia Stakes to Hamika, as we talked about, and exacted revenge for that. So now in 4 starts, Rivera, 2 wins, 2 seconds, and really for an $85,000 2-year-old in training purchase, she's really outrun expectations. Super Corredora, certainly a bigger Kentucky Oaks impact probably at this stage of the career, but don't be surprised if Rivera can go a little bit longer. She's by Lexitonian, not a sire that's going to bring a lot, and as we see at $85,000 in the 2-year-old in training sales, but Lexitonian could get some distance, so I wouldn't be surprised if Rivera is able to stretch out off the 7/8 win in the Desi Arnaz Stakes. Now, talking 2-year-olds at Del Mar, a little bit of news came out from Brad Free at DRF that we're not going to have a Bob Hope Stakes this fall at Del Mar because there's not enough 2-year-old colts to fill the race. So that race has been scrapped, and really a situation that needs to be discussed in Southern California. I mean, Bob Baffert wins all of the 2-year-old maiden specials, it seems like, for the colts. And when it comes time to nominate for stakes, there just aren't enough barns out there that have good 2-year-old colts that are even trying to knock him off at this level. It's almost as if the 2-year-old colts on dirt have just conceded the division to Bob Baffert in recent years. You remember back, I mean, Doug O'Neill would have, 2-year-old after 2-year-old, just not in the same kind of boat anymore with the Doug O'Neill trainees. Every once in a while, John Sadler will have one that pops up. But you think of the bigger barns in Southern California, and they're, Phil D'Amato, you're thinking turf horses, doesn't have a lot on the dirt. There just isn't any competition, it seems, for the 2-year-old colts in California for Bob Baffert at this point. And starting to see some effects of that. I mean, we can't even get the Bob Hope Stakes to go at 7/8 of a mile during the Del Mar Fall Meet. That's been a pretty, reflective stakes over the years. Some nice horses, Bullard and others, have won that and have been pretty solid performers. So no Bob Hope Stakes this year, and not enough 2-year-olds to go around. So you wonder what that means for the Los Al Futurity. The Los Al Futurity coming up in December. And then, of course, at Santa Anita, you'll have the beginning of the year. We'll start off the stakes series towards the Santa Anita Derby. These early season races like the Bob Lewis. We used to have the Sham, but we don't have the Sham. We got the Bob Lewis and the San Felipe and the Santa Anita Derby in that series now. So, we've lost the Sham along the way. Now we don't have the Bob Hope. You're starting to see this 3-year-old Southern California stake schedule start to dissipate a bit, and it kind of all falls back to the Baffert factor. He's just absolutely dominated. I had a stat a few years back, I know now, but it was in my countdown of the Crown scouting reports for the 3-year-olds. But I just listed like all the Southern California 3-year-old stakes and how it was just Baffert, 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 Baffert. John Sheriff's, occasionally pops up with one. Of course, this year Sheriff's with Baeza, and he's had some decent runners in the 3-year-old ranks over the years. But you're typically only getting like one out of John Sheriff's a season, if that, and not every season with a Sheriff's trainee. So unless Doug O'Neill, John Sadler, John Sheriff's can kind of put some horses together. Michael McCarthy now in Southern California, of course, with journalism this year was a big boost to that Southern California depth for sure. And journalism actually rose to the top of the Southern California ranks, winning the Santa Anita Derby. So who's going to step up with the 2-year-old colts turning 3 this year? Do we have a Michael McCarthy runner? Do we have a John Sheriff who can challenge these Bafferts? Right now, nobody can challenge him, and therefore we have no Bob Hope Stakes coming up here at Del Mar for their fall meet. All right, but the topic this week to talk about was certainly the Kentucky Oaks Trail and how John Sadler now has 2 hands to play in there. Super Corredora, winner of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, and now he gets another one trimming the Oaks branches with Rivera winning the Desi Arnaz Stakes. Go to our 4th topic this week on It's Official. Claiming Crown was last week at Churchill Downs, but it was really an Irad Ortiz festival throughout the course of the racing week. What an iradical week of winning he had last week at Churchill Downs. Check out the numbers. We know he's a champion jockey here in the U.S., but he hasn't ridden Churchill Downs consistently throughout his career. He's now bedded down in Kentucky, had an excellent fall meet at Keeneland, and now this Churchill fall meet meet. What a week he had going into the next to last week of racing. We've got this week and then Thanksgiving week left at Churchill Downs. But last week he started Wednesday off with a 5-win day, won 2 on Thursday, 2 more on Friday, 3 on Saturday on Claiming Crown Day, including 3 Claiming Crown titles, and then 3 on Sunday. For the week, Irad Ortiz won 15 of 42 starts. That's 36% winners. He was 55% in the exacta. If you bet $1 on every one of his horses, you got $1.48 back, a 48% winning ROI. Now, he was 7 for 16 aboard favorites, so that means more winners for Irad. 8 were not favored than were in 7. He won for 14 different trainers last week. Only Brad Cox did he double up with. 14 of the 15 winners, again, for different trainers. He had 3 wins on Claiming Crown Day, including Nation and the Rapid Transit. No other jockey in North America last week had more than 8 wins, 15 for Irad. And here he is, taking Nation on a tour de force.
Third on the outside. My Noble Knight comes wide for the stretch drive. Mia Comet's in behind horses. Global Sensation far outside, furlong to go. Nation kicked away quickly. Nation turned back the challengers, opened up by 5 in a matter of strides. My Noble Knight runs up into second, but they're coming down to the finish, and Nation crushed them. Sharp winner was Nation.
So the jockey colony in Kentucky certainly in flux in 2025. You had the injury earlier this year to Tyler Gaffleone, who missed significant time, an injury to Brian Hernandez Jr., who has missed significant time, but on the comeback trail now, Brian Hernandez. So great to see him back after the spill he had during the Churchill September meet. Flavian Pratt came in and rode Keeneland exceptionally well, but Pratt is dominating in New York and riding an Aqueduct here in the fall, not riding the Churchill Fall Meet. So some of the riders that we saw at Keeneland have gone different ways, are gone by the wayside by injury. Some are now back in action. Gaffleone riding well, but not at the dominant level he was prior to his injury in the spring. But part of that is because of Jose Ortiz's success. We talked about this earlier this year on the podcast. Irad's brother Jose we're talking about here. The big year he had over the winter at Fairgrounds and how that would set him up to be one of the top riders in Kentucky because of that regional movement from winter to spring, summer, and fall. Those Fairgrounds connections and the connections he made business-wise, certainly last winter in such a dominant performance that he had as leading rider at Fairgrounds, that bode very well for Jose Ortiz throughout the course of this year. So really the Kentucky Jockey Colony in a lot of swing and a lot of change. And Irad Ortiz riding full-time in Kentucky. He won't ride the Turfway winter meet. He'll go to Florida this winter, but he'll be back in the spring for Keeneland and ride Churchill throughout the year. It's going to be a Florida, Kentucky circuit for Irad Ortiz. And you could just see, no matter what circuit he's on, how strong and dominant he can be in the standings. And a 15-win week last week. Again, no other jockey in North America won more than 8 races last week. So when you rattle off 15 and you do it at probably the premier meet running right now, especially with the cancellations. Del Mar had a cancellation last week. New York had to cancel a bit for windy conditions. I mean, it was all about Irad Ortiz and the dominance that he had in Kentucky last week. Interesting to see as he goes to Florida. The colony in Florida looks like it's going to be a little lighter this year than in some others because some of the top jocks aren't riding Gulfstream this winter. They're going some other places. Oaklawn is picking up some big riders this winter. So we see Joel Rosario heading to Oaklawn to ride for the winner. Luis Saez will head to Oaklawn to ride for the winner. These are guys who probably would have been in that mix in Gulfstream. Some years Rosario has ridden Southern California over the course of the winter. So really, Gulfstream might get a little bit lighter this winter for Irad Ortiz, and the dominance that he's showing in Kentucky here in the fall probably carries over into the spring. Of course, we look for Jose Ortiz back at Fairgrounds as the top rider this winter as well. So again, you're looking at a Gulfstream colony that, say, 3-4 years ago would have included Rosario, would have included Saez, would have included Jose Ortiz. Those guys are headed elsewhere. You get to Florida this winter, it's going to be a very strong, certain winter for Irad Ortiz. And what an iradical week he had riding last week, booting home those 15 winners, 3 of them in the Claiming Crown. Our fifth and final topic on the podcast this week and each and every week is our Stars of Tomorrow segment. We're looking for 2-year-olds who could be shining next year at 3. We found one on the turf in a turf mile. It was a weekday race last Wednesday at Churchill Downs. The homebred for Helen Alexander, trained by Cherie DeVoe. Check out this 2-year-old filly, Cat Spring, 3-year-old winner, a 3-length winner, I should say, in a turf mile.
Cat Spring comes alive. Wide move there. Amended Dreamers buried in traffic. Melody Maker has come off the rails. She's been switched outside too. Racing for the 8th pole. Sugar Doll short lead. Cat Spring cut loose. And here's Cat Spring up for the lead. Melody Maker finishing with interest. Lost Court is hanging tough. Final 16th. Cat Spring goes clear by 3, and she will do it. Cat Spring first on the wire. Melody Maker might have nailed second there from Lost Chord. Sugar Doll fourth.
Keep her on your list in the 3-year-old filly turf ranks. Cat Spring, one to watch in here. Of course, She's So Pretty had such a great career for Cherie DeVoe, coming up through the 3-year-old turf filly ranks and had such a massive year this year, almost winning the Breeders' Cup filly and mare turf. This could be the heir apparent. She feels pretty. Cat Spring, one to keep an eye on here for trainer Cherie DeVoe. Fourth in a Keeneland Dirt Sprint in her debut. She stretched out around 2 turns beautifully in this spot. She's where she needs to be. She's by Upstart, and she's a half to Golden Afternoon, horse who was in the Bourbon Stakes, was second in the Bourbon, second in the Black Gold, and this year was second in the Grade 1 Franklin Simpson Stakes on the turf at Kentucky Downs, won the Tom Ridge at Presque Isle. So a half-sister to a really nice one. This one by Upstart. Cat Spring, again, the half to Golden Afternoon, second in Grade 1 company on the turf this year. It's a 3-year-old. Could be a Grade 1 kind of outlook for Cat Spring next year in the 3-year-old filly ranks. Maybe we'll see her in some of those big stakes races on the NYRA circuit with that good 3-year-old filly turf series they've got. Certainly, if you're going to head to the beginning of the year, Gulfstream, Tampa Bay Downs have excellent 3-year-old filly turf stakes there as well, working up towards something like the Edgewood at Churchill Downs Oaks Derby weekend as potential spots for a filly like this. Cat Spring, 2-year-old filly, 3-length winner in a turf mile for Cherie DeVoe. That is our Star of Tomorrow. Let's review the topics this week on the It's Official podcast. We started things off with our Goosebump Award winner. Welcome back to the races and the winner's circle to Shred the Gnar. She had been away since May for trainer Brian Lynch. Handily the winner of the Chaluki Stakes to get the 3-for-4 lifetime. A Rapid Redux re-release, if you will. Owner Robert Cole Jr. of Maryland's got a follow-up to a horse 14 years ago, Rapid Redux, who ran off 22 straight wins. It's Teaching the Release. Dominant winner of the Randy Funkhauser Memorial at Charlestown for the 2nd year in a row. Looks to be another horse who, like Rapid Redux, could find himself in a division where he's just superior and run off some big-time numbers. Teaching the Release, impressive at Charlestown in the Randy Funkhauser. To John Sadler trimming the Oaks branches, we talked about a second upset of Bob Baffert for trainer John Sadler with his 2-year-old fillies. Of course, Super Corridor won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile fillies over the Baffert trained favorite Explora, and this time it was Rivera, a 3/4 length winner over Hamika, a 1-5 shot for Baffert in the Desi Arnaz Stakes. Sadler 2, Baffert 0 in the Big Oaks races the end of the year in Southern California. A radical week of racing for Irad. Ortiz Jr. won 15 races on the week, including 3 during the Claiming Crown at Churchill on Saturday. All 15 wins came under the twin spires for him for 14 different trainers, doubling up only with Brad Cox. Irad Ortiz winning for everybody in Kentucky right now. And our Star of Tomorrow, Cat Spring, a 2-year-old filly who could be one of those 3-year-old turf fillies to watch next year. The follow-up, perhaps, to She Feels Pretty for trainer Cherie DeVoe. Those 5 topics are now official because our handicapper emeritus Jeff Siegel and I say so. That's the way we play the game here on the It's Official podcast. I'll be back next week to recap what we had from this past weekend and talk about some Thanksgiving topics as we head into a holiday weekend. Scott Shapiro and I will be with you on Friday this week for the First Call podcast, where we handicap 8 stakes races from around the country each and every week for Saturday and Sunday viewing. So for picks and analysis of those big races coming up this weekend, be sure to check out Scott and I on Friday with the First Call podcast. On behalf of everybody with First Bet and Express Bet, I'm Jeremy Plonk. Have a great week, everybody, and good luck at the races.